I have been probably more positive than most people regarding Florida this offseason. I was probably more negative than most people were regarding Florida last offseason. I think they're going to be pretty good. Do I think they're going to go 4-0 in that stretch we talked about? No. But do I think they're going to go 0-4? I also don't think that. Like, the absoluteness of Paul's proclamation shook me up a little bit, Ari. And it's not, Paul's wrong just as often as I am about this stuff. But it made me think about,
what you're not saying, though, that's important. It's not, I don't think Paul predicted that they will lose 4 games. I think he's saying at this moment right now that Florida should lose those 4, which is a completely different statement. And that I disagree with. Like, do you believe that Florida, as we understand it right now, should be perceived as an underdog in those games? And I think that
I don't think Florida will be underdogs in all 4 of those games. I think Florida will be an underdog in the Texas game for sure. I think
Texas is going to be the national championship favorite.
Yeah, depending on what happens the first couple of weeks of the season, Florida could be favored in the other 3. We have no idea at this point.
Yeah. So like that, like the thing is that's more important than trying to project how a team is going to do during a 4-game stretch. And I said this to you after the show, but like, there's no guarantee that A&M is going to be good or Georgia is going to be good. Like we're trying to come up with hard schedules and stuff. And it's very difficult because a lot of that has to do with reputation and what we think is on the roster and not so much whether or not the team turns out to be functionally good. There could be pockets on that schedule right now that look impossible that end up turning out to be pretty easy.
Right.
And like to me, how you view Florida, I think we need to frame like what the reasonable expectations are. Like we know that Billy Napier needs to go win 10 games probably to keep his job. Like that's a fact, right? But like,
no, I think he can go 9-3 and still keep his job.
Okay. Change what I was going to say from
don't
10
think
to 9.
I don't think 8-4 though.
But we know that Billy Napier has to perform to some degree. I don't know. Me and you disagree on what it has to look like. 9-3.
They have to be better than they were last year, for sure.
So like that is separate though from what do you think Florida actually is, and is going 9-3 next year going to be beating the odds? Because that's what Paul's saying. Do you think that Florida actually not going 8-4 and being better than that and being better than last year is more likely or less likely than just the norm? Like that's the discussion.
See, it probably is beating the odds. I don't think those odds are that long though. I think there's probably like a 45% chance that they can do that.
But Florida,
and I happen to be on that side of it.
Total for the year is 7.5 win total, right? So it would be for Billy Napier to keep his job. He would have to greatly exceed the expectation in Vegas right now,
which he did last year.
Yeah. And like that's the thing though. So like, I feel like what he is and what he's supposed to do are very different things. And like Paul saying they should go 0-4, I disagree with pretty sternly, but at the same time, I'm having a hard time, having a real projection or coming up with a realistic projection for what Florida actually is. Cause a lot of it is when you have
let's hear what Paul said again. Let's play it one more time. Games 3-4 are this: at LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, at Texas A&M. You are either dead coach walking or a national title contender at the end of that.
I mean, by the way, not even a big statement to say he should lose all 4.
Wow. Really?
I think
I've been drinking a little Kool-Aid locally here. But I was at the LSU and Ole Miss game.
No, that's not right, Paul. They should lose all 4. You mean they should lose to A&M and Miami? I don't know if I would go that far.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying they. I really don't think that's a big statement to make.
So
I think it's a pretty big statement.
Yeah, and I think that what he's trying to say, is that he doesn't have high expectations for Florida. Okay,
exactly.
That's what it is. So the question is because we both do, and then a lot of this gets caught up though with quarterback hype. I think both you and I are enamored with DJ
Lagway. Yes,
confusing to me when people aren't, because like to me, watching what he did last year from a physical standpoint, is legitimate proof that he has a very high ceiling. Will he reach it? I guess we don't know. But I'm wondering from a roster standpoint, from top to bottom, if the SEC is the same exact conference that it was last year, is Florida a top 4 team in the SEC from your understanding from top to bottom?
They can be. They can be. But look, okay, decision-making has to happen too. Like some decisions were made in the Tennessee game that are the difference between Florida being a 7-5 and an 8-4 team last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's got to improve. What I think Paul's statement did for me, because I came back around and said, you know what, you may be right. Billy Napier may be under more pressure. I think the way I was looking at it was that because Billy Napier had survived last season and survived essentially being fired. I mean, let's be real here. He was done after the Texas A&M game. I think I was looking at it like, okay, he thinks he's playing with house money. He's not worried about any of this anymore. He's already done this. He's already been through it. So he's not going to feel the pressure. The more I think about it, I'm like, no, he probably is going to feel the pressure. Like, he still has to win these games. They're still very hard. It's still a very hard schedule. And having lived through it probably doesn't help as much as I think it does. So I think that's where I'm at on this now. Is
you still fear the thing. You know, if you go to the doctor and you're afraid of a bad prognosis because you have a family history, that getting a clear bill of health that day doesn't alleviate you from the anxiety and fear that could come again in the future. So like, I feel like, you know, if your number one fear in life is failing and you have to look that in the eye, even if you survive, you still have to do it again. And the reason why, and I think that the point that got you over the top is that there's a realistic chance that Billy Napier couldn't make it through the season, let alone, you know, getting to November.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, you know, like, I think like that is like going into a year two where you have no, like last year he was given the benefit of the doubt and he was allowed to navigate a bad season and they actually turned it into a positive ending. I don't think this year he's going to have the ability to stay on. I think if they're 5-1 coming out of that stretch, if they finish the first half of the season 5-1, there's a really good chance they're making the playoff. There's a really good chance that they are exactly what he's been promising all along. If they are 3-3 coming out of that stretch, it's probably not going to end well. Yeah, I mean, if they're 5-1, that means that they have victories over Miami, LSU, and A&M probably. Because I think it's okay.
Probably not Texas, but yeah.
Although Texas is at home, you never know. It could be a good game.
4-2 coming out of that stretch still gives you a chance. Now you probably got to beat Georgia if you want to make the college football playoff, but you got a chance.
Yeah, but what if by that time in the season Georgia is also 4-2? Like, I mean, like that's also possible. So, like, I think that like looking at the schedule, the last 4 games, I think they could conceivably win all of those, right? So, like at the end of the year, if you're able to get through the first half of the season and you're in 4-2 land, then you have a chance to have a really special season still. That said, they're going to have to win some tough games that they might be underdogs in or might be a 2-point favorite in, and you're going to have to coach well. You're going to have your team prepared, and as you said earlier on in the show, you're going to have to make the correct decisions in critical moments in those games. And maybe, you know, house money or having lived through those types of things will already give him like the calm, maybe learning. I mean, because he's still a relatively young coach at this level, right? Like, it's not like he's been, you know, I think you got to work through some of this stuff. So, like, you know, I don't know. But like the thing that I think we need to program our brains is like what, like, you're like, when he said those things, you're like, I think I've been drinking the Florida Kool-Aid. I mean, if you read the chat, like sentiment on Florida as a football program is pretty down, like across the board.
It's still overwhelmingly negative, and that's where I realized that I'm a little off, and I was the exact opposite last year.
But you also you have to acknowledge too that you live in the community. You see people all the time that like ask you about it, and they're in a good mood, so you're going to be in a good mood. Like, I'm sure that impacts you.
No, locally they were in a good mood last year, and I was telling everybody's getting mad at me last year around here.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, they're going to be better. I'm like, how are they going to be better? Give me names. Like, explain to me how they're going to be better. And then I'm feeling pretty self-satisfied after they lose to Miami and A&M. Like, hey, I told you so.
Yeah, I actually think too that like we talk a lot about DJ Lagway and we talk about his development and his ceiling, but like they've got some freshman receivers they're going to need some production out of. Their lines are going to have to play as well as they did at the second half of
at the end of the season. Correct. And they're going to have to show that they made the correct decisions in terms of the transfer portal on the D-line. And I'm not talking about who they took because they didn't really have to take anybody. They were stacked at the edge rusher position, and they had to let some of those guys go because they couldn't afford to keep them all. And so like TJ Searcy's at Texas A&M, Jack Pyburn's at LSU. The thought is that they kept the ones they wanted to keep, but you still have to make the correct choices on those because the players they lost are decent players too. So we'll see how those do. And like, if Jack Pyburn has 3 sacks for LSU, you know what it's going to sound like. Like, and LSU wins that game. You know what that's going to sound like. So,
I mean, that's like the interesting thing about the transfer portal in general is like just like the highest stake transfers. Because they don't just go to like the Pac-12 anymore. Like, you know, like a lot of times they're on your schedule on multiple stops. And you're going to have to face them and you're going to have to come out on top. It kind of reminds me of the Cal, conversation we had with Paul at the end there of like, breaking up with your former partner and then having to see them all the time, which is terrible. So, no, I'm excited about the season though. And I am drinking. I think we both said that we would take the team win total over, right?
Oh yeah.
I feel like but if they go 0-4, like Paul said, in that stretch, it's going to get.
They're not hitting that. They're not going over it. Yeah. So, it's really fascinating, and so.
But I think one thing I want to say, Andy.
Yeah.
Their season started on such a low point. Like that was such a terrible way to start the season. I wonder too, like with the way that Billy Napier's team gained momentum last year, if like starting the season with a few gimmies just to like work some kinks out and to kind of get a bearings for who you are and stuff is going to be a good thing for this team. Like being 2-0 going into LSU rather than having to play them in the opener, the way they had to play a really good Miami team in the opener last year, I think might be good for them. It just sucks that they're going to have to go to Death Valley in Miami back-to-back weeks. But, you want DJ Lagway to see some throws go through some defender's hands and into the end zone and into his hands. You want to feel his confidence. He wants to feel healthy. Like all these things that are important to Florida's growth, especially considering the fact that we've seen what they look like when they start getting confident. Like gaining some confidence earlier in the year, I think might be a nice little bonus for them that they didn't have the ability to have last year.